right, guys, we're on the independent practice section now. You're going to be responsible for reading the document below, and as you read, highlight evidence that shows how Japanese expansion led to World War II. I will be looking for this when I'm grading your work. Below it is an example of an AER or ACE paragraph. This is something we've used in class for a long time. We just don't name it that anymore, but the format should look pretty familiar. The source of this comes from Jackson Montagon. The title of his work is World War II in the Pacific, published by the Holocaust and World War II Memorial Museum Archives on January 14th, 2003. I've also included a map here below so you can see kind of the areas I'm talking about. Here is Manchuria. So when the article talks about Manchuria, it's the territory north of Korea. It's kind of like north of Korea and China, just over the border during this time of Beijing. So it's also worth knowing that during this time period, just like in World War I, there was the Central and Entente powers. There's the Axis and Allied powers. So in World War II, the Axis powers are the bad guys, and the Allied powers are the good guys. So there's some like groundwork there. For the most part, the bad guys were Italy, Germany, and Japan once they joined, and the good guys were Britain, the United States, France, pretty much everybody else that wasn't Germany. So let's take a look at this. Japanese expansion in East Asia began in 1931 with the invasion of Manchuria. And it continued in 1937 with the brutal attack on China. On September 27, 1940, Japan was invited to sign the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy, thus entering the military alliance known as the Axis. Again, the Axis powers, the bad guys. Pardon me. This put Japan on the side of the conflict World War II as Hitler and Germany. Seeking to stop Japanese aggression and force Japan to leave Manchuria and China, the United States stopped buying and selling goods with Japan until they left China. This caused huge food and resource shortages in Japan and caused them to hate the United States. Wanting revenge and to shift the balance of power, Japan decided to attack the United States and British forces in Asia and seize the resources of Southeast Asia. Ultimately, their attack on Pearl Harbor, which happened on December 7, 1941, launched them into an all-out war with the United States, and thus the United States allies. So this is areas World War II in the Pacific from 1941 to 1945. It does give you a little bit of like background building, but you see the Japanese Empire was Korea and Japan in 1931. By 1942, we see that they had gained Manchuria, this area around Beijing, Nanking. We see Burma, Thailand, Indochina, Malaysia, the Dutch colonies, parts of New Guinea, the Philippines. Japan had gained huge amounts of territory in the Pacific, which very much concerned the United States because we are just on the other side of the Pacific Ocean here, as well as other European allies. You can see these blue arrows are showing Allied advances. These are the good guy advances. And anywhere there's like a blue bomb, that's where the Allies had victories. You see the red arrows and red bombs are examples of Japanese expansion and Japanese victories. It's like dotted line that sort of runs everywhere is the extent of the expansion. So we know that they had all of the territory that was like within this like dotted line in this area. They did not try to invade the Soviet Union. They sort of learned from Germany's mistakes in World War I. Also, they had a lot of other like sea territory that they were more concerned about. You also see that there are two examples of these like mushroom cloud bombs. These are the cities that the United States dropped atomic bombs on in 1945, ultimately ending World War II for Japan and the world. And those cities were Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Your job now is to answer this prompt. What actions did Japan take that led to the start and continuation of World War I? We know that for the most part, Europe was already feeling the strain of World War II. I'm sorry, I should say of World War II. They were already feeling the strain of World War as Hitler was ramping up his armies. And by 1939, when he invaded Poland, it was a full-out declaration of war. So how did Japan's actions in the Pacific theater lead to the start and continuation of World War I? And if you know anything about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, ultimately, like, how did that change the United States reaction? So the first one is your answer statement. Answer the questions. We're looking for specific actions that Japan took to start a war. I've given you a sentence stem here already. Japanese expansion was one of the causes of World War II. To start World War II, Japan, like, what did they do to help start World War II? You're going to respond there. Evidence comes from just that first one. In Jackson Montagon's excuse me, January 2013 article, World War II and the Pacific. It states, you're just copying and pasting evidence down. Then we're doing our reasoning and analysis. This one gets a little bit deeper than we've been doing. There's some bias fit in here. We just kind of squished it together. This should just say Montagon. Montagon's point of view is that of, so what was his ultimate point of view and opinion? The author does or does not show bias. Does he show that Japan was good? Does he show Japan was bad? Right or wrong in their actions? The purpose is, remember, you're not just saying the purpose is to inform, to entertain, but the purpose is to describe such and such and such to whomever. And this proves that Japan helped cause World War II because. How does all of this and his quote help to prove that Japan caused World War II? Once you're done with that, you are going to go to Edulastic and complete Week 4, Module 1 Mastery Check. Make sure that you turn this in. You're not just sharing it, but you are turning it in. Today's lesson, you should have gained, similar to World War I, alliances were divided into two groups, countries that wanted to maintain the balance of power and those that wanted to gain political and economic power through expansion. Japan, like Germany, was expanding through military campaigns. The first nation that Germany invaded was Poland. The first nation that Japan invaded was Korea, then Manchuria, then China proper. So this idea of expansion for resources, for political gain, etc. You should have gained an ability to write a historical claim. That's continued practice. And your supporting claim with textual evidence. Again, that's further practice. Make sure that you have turned in your Google Doc, you've done your mastery check, and you are good for the day. Thanks, guys. See you next time.